Hi, my name is Jackie Vanderberg and I live in Auckland, New Zealand. I started researching the facts around the COVID vaccine some months ago when I found out that aborted babies were associated with them. So, this video is not about the safety of the vaccines, but just rather the underlying justice issues that have been hidden that I want to bring to light. I'm an office worker, I'm not a scientist, and I have no medical background. As a follower of Jesus and pro life, being able to make an informed decision is of the utmost importance to me. There is quite a bit of conflicting information out there, and quite a bit that I found that isn't really in the mainstream news. So I'm making this video so that you can make your own informed decision, and I encourage you to research the facts for yourself. So, personal integrity is really important to me. And so, before I talk about anything that involves an issue of abortion, I need to tell you that as a young woman, I had an abortion myself. It's something that I deeply regretted afterwards and really grieved afterwards. And I still deeply regret and grieve now. Um, about a decade later, I gave my life to Jesus. And the only reason that I have any peace with God is because of what Jesus has done for me by shedding his blood for my sin. So I am not a better person than anyone else, and I've been forgiven much, and I'm not standing in judgment on anyone else. And I just really wanted to put that out there before I start. Um, so the website that I have got the majority of my information from is the Children of God for Life website. They've been researching for over 20 years. They provide very strong facts with links and strong referencing to FDA transcripts, to scientific and medical journals, so that you can see that the information is accurate and factual. So that is where I've got my information that's informed most of my understanding. Um, so yeah, I encourage you to go to that website and check all these facts out for yourself. And here are some of these facts that I'd like to share with you. The COVID vaccines that have been currently purchased for New Zealand use fetal cell lines from abortions in their production and their development and their testing. In my previous video, I was talking about Pfizer, and I said it only uses the fetal cell line HEK293 in the testing phase. Now I understand a little bit more. The use of the cell line is actually essential to the production of the spike protein, which involves quality control testing. And this is essential to the production process. So it's even more than just a test. There are many fetal cell lines currently in use and being created, and other areas where aborted children are used in medical science and research. There is cooperation between the abortion clinics and researchers because the tissue needs to be fresh. Miscarriages are not suitable for the research. There are fetal tissue banks in existence. A famous one is the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. Baby body parts have been harvested and are still being harvested and are sold as commodities. In the early days, vivisection was performed on live babies to obtain their body parts. Just to give a bit of background, a law was passed in America in 1922 called the Model Eugenical Sterilization Law, requiring the forcible sterilization of those deemed unfit to breed. Eugenics is where they try and weed out types of people from society deemed a burden to society or inferior. Undesirables by law include the feeble-minded, mentally disabled, epileptics, the deaf, the blind, the homeless, and the chronic offenders of the law. Immorality also came under the definition of feeble-minded, and unmarried pregnant women were forcibly institutionalized and sterilized, and their babies forcibly aborted. So this could mean a very late-term abortion also. These babies were then used for scientific research, in particular vaccine research. The ethnic cleansing continued well into the 1970s. Aborted babies were used for experiments conducted for polio and rubella vaccines in the 1950s and 60s. There There were over 80 abortions involved with the rubella vaccine production. Dr. Stanley Plotkin, who developed the rubella vaccine and worked on anthrax, polio, rabies, and rotavirus vaccines, has been dubbed the godfather of vaccines. He is currently on the board of Moderna and consults for pharmaceutical companies to develop the COVID vaccines. Dr. Stanley has also been advising the World Health Organization and the Gates Foundation. In an interview currently on YouTube, under oath, Dr. Stanley Plotkin admitted that orphans, mentally disabled children, the babies of mothers in prison, and individuals under colonial rule were used to study an experimental vaccine. He admitted to expressing that it is better to perform experiments on those less likely to be able to contribute to society, such as children with disabilities, than children or adults without disabilities. He has since changed his views. In the case of using individuals under colonial rule to study an experimental vaccine, Dr. Stanley Plotkin's experiment in the Belgian Congo involved almost 1 million people. And at this point, I can't find any evidence to suggest that Dr. Plotkin has been charged with any crimes against humanity. And the date of the interview on YouTube was 2018. So coming back to COVID today, the use of fetal cell lines in the vaccines is not the only area where aborted children are used. The Pfizer vaccine and other COVID vaccines used humanized mice to speed up the vaccine development. So what is a humanized mouse? It's a mouse that has been bred specifically with a suppressed immune system so that aborted children's organs, tissues, body parts can be transplanted into the mouse. So this is something that is going on today and requires freshly aborted children to sustain it. The Kent Scientific Corporation is a worldwide provider of integrated solutions for laboratory animal research. They described humanized mice as mice that have been genetically modified to carry functioning human material, including genes, cells, tissues, or organs. On their internet blog, Kent Scientific advisors in May 2020, scientists at the University of Buffalo announced they had created mouse embryos that contained up to 4% human cells, the highest level of human cells ever instilled in a non-human creature. Mice that contain human cells can be used to mimic human conditions, allowing researchers to determine how the human body reacts to pathogens and develop potential treatments without involving humans until the later stages of testing. In an article in the Taiwan News dated the 11th of January 2021, headed Wuhan lab infected humanized mice with bat coronaviruses in 2019, the question is asked, did experiments with new bat viruses in transgenic mice lead to the COVID-19 pandemic? And I'm just going to share some of the article with you. The article describes a state-funded project at the Wuhan Institute of Virology to research how spike proteins in SARS-like coronaviruses bind to the receptors in the cells of humans, bats, and other animals. In 2007, the lab had discovered how to convert a virus that only infected bats into one that could infect humans. In 2014, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, or WIV for short, began taking part in gain-of-function experiments with the University of North Carolina. In October of that year, Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, called for funding of such projects to be halted out of concern for their danger, but the gain-of-function projects continued at WIV. By 2017, the WIV published a paper in which it reported 8 chimeric viruses that it had created from transplanted receptor-binding domains from SARS-like bat viruses collected over the course of 5 years from a cave in Yunnan, using reverse genetics techniques. In 2019, just before the known start of the pandemic, work began on a project titled Pathogenicity of 2 new bat SARS-related coves to transgenic mice expressing human ACE2. No information about this research has been released to the public since the start of the pandemic, including data on the 8 chimeric viruses the WIV had been infecting the mice with. All of the Institute's databases have been offline since the start of the pandemic for alleged cyber security issues. So back to the issue of aborted children and their use in scientific research. Today, aborted children are the most preferred lab rat. Their tissue is transplanted not only into mice, but also into rats. Baby body parts are harvested and sold as commodities, and in America, in 2018, $115 million in federal funding was spent on 173 projects in universities that used tissues taken from aborted fetuses. With regards to the ongoing use of fetal cell lines, Dr. Maureen Kondik, NIH Ethics Board Member and Associate Professor of Neurobiology and Anatomy at the University of Utah School of Medicine, noted that the HEK293T cell line is so widely in use for decades that she said it's essentially a component of every single type of basic biological research and all types of medical research. They create a lot of concern for people, she acknowledged, but then if that's the ethical question, then do you disavow any interaction with the medical profession, period, where you might be complicit in the utilisation of a cell line that is so widely in use? It is essentially impossible to avoid it. Bishop Strickland from the St. Philip's Institute and Dr. Stacey Trasancos from Children of God for Life, they're both in America, and others have responded publicly to the growing consensus among Catholic ethicists that vaccines derived from aborted fetal tissue are not only morally permissible, but also obligatory for the common good. They have written a statement of conscience to awaken conscience. In it they write, "We lament a soulless scientism that fails to account for the unique dignity of the human person and the role of suffering in human life. We are told there is nearly ubiquitous use of HEK293 cells in the scientific and medical industry, so basically just extremely widespread use. If this is so, we take it to be evidence of structures of sin surrounding abortion. We invite and call upon our lawmakers to require all product manufacturers to reveal publicly and label their use of these cells so that we can go forward avoiding such products. More has been done to resist animal cruelty and the use of genetically modified organisms than to resist the benefiting from the murder of a child. We lament that we have been led to use compromised products and medicines in the past without knowledge. Let all that has been hidden be brought into the light. We know that trafficking in aborted fetal body parts exists and amounts to an industry. The acceptance of the use of tissues derived in the past does have implications for incentivizing this industry. While no attention is given to the truth about human life in the public square, and while academia, the media, and elite institutions remain in the grips of a culture of death, we believe a more radical public witness is needed today. And then moving on, I've taken from the Human Rights Commission website in New Zealand, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 3 states, "The right to life is the supreme right of human beings. It is basic to all human rights, and without it, all other rights are without meaning. The term life has been interpreted widely by courts internationally to include the right to livelihood, health, education, environment, and dignity. The state has a duty to protect human life against unwarranted actions by public authorities as well as by private persons." And next to private persons, there's an asterisk, and down further by the asterisk, it says there have been differing interpretations internationally of whether the right to life applies to the unborn child. Next, I'd like to quote Deacon Keith Fournier from the St. Philip's Institute in America when he says, "The womb is the first home of the whole human race, and the child in the womb is our neighbour. The embryonic person cannot be treated as property." I also quote Mother Teresa, who said, "The unborn are the poorest of the poor." In New Zealand and around the world, the unborn child is not entitled to protections covered in the Declaration of Human Rights. The sanctity of life and the right to dignity do not apply to the unborn child. So, as a follower of Jesus, where do I sit with all of this? When I turned my life over to Jesus, I gave him authority in my life and first place in my life. And I'm under his authority as his disciple. And so my relationship with him, my relationship with God, takes the highest priority for me over any other relationship or priority in my life. So this issue is of really utmost importance to me. In the Bible, in Isaiah 66, 1-2, God says, "Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you will build me? And where is the place of my rest? For all those things my hand has made, and all those things exist by me, says the Lord. But on this one will I look, on him who is of a humble and a contrite spirit, and who trembles at my word." So as I've been researching all of this over these last few months, I've just been asking God, what's your heart in all of this? I want to hear from you. What are you saying? And these are what I've sort of found as I've kept seeking him and reading his word. So Psalm 94 particularly just really leapt out at me. And verses 6-10 says, "They slay the widow and the stranger and murder the fatherless. Yet they say, the Lord does not see, nor does the God of Jacob understand. Understand this, you foolish among the people. You foolish, when will you become wise? He who planted the ear, shall he not hear? He who formed the eye, shall he not see? He who instructs the nations, shall he not punish? He who teaches men knowledge." And then further down in verses 15-16, "But justice will return to the righteous, and all the upright in heart will follow it. Who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Who will stand up for me against the workers of iniquity?" And verses 20-23, "Shall the throne of iniquity, which devises evil by law, have any fellowship with you? They gather together against the life of the righteous and condemn innocent blood. But the Lord has been my defense, and my God, the rock of my refuge. And he will turn back upon them their own iniquity, and will wipe them out by means of their own wickedness. The Lord our God will wipe them out." And he also laid Isaiah 1, particularly 15-17 on my heart. "When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, and plead for the widow." And Ephesians 5, 8-17 really spoke to me, and it actually spurred me on to making this video, and I'm just going to share it with you. "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore he says, Awake you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. See then that you walk carefully, not as the unwise, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is." So that's been my heart, just to understand what his will is. and I've been seeking him for his will, and I've come to this understanding. Shedding innocent blood is tapu. It is sin. God hates it. The land is polluted by it. God sees and he hears what is done in secret, and he will call to account. Abortion is the sin of murder and of the unborn child. It is the shedding of innocent blood. Justifying the use of aborted baby body parts in scientific research to provide vaccines and cure diseases might be justified in human eyes, but it is not justified in God's eyes. It is injustice and it is sin to murder these children, to sell them and harvest their bodies for our benefit. Selling murdered babies as commodities is human trafficking. It is injustice. It is sin. It is murder. It is the shedding of innocent blood and then reducing a person made in the image of God to an object for commercial gain. It is a culture of death. Exploitation of the fatherless, those under colonial rule, the lame, the weak, the poor, the voiceless is injustice. It is mocking their maker. It is sin. Institutionalizing and sterilizing women, using their murdered children in vaccines is injustice. It is murder. It is violence and robbery. It is sin. Just because these actions happened in the past, there are still plenty happening in the present, but it does not remove the injustice just because some of them were in the past. We are still connected today. We are just adding sin to sin and death to death. We're building on the foundation of what has gone before, and there's a thread that is going through from the early days of eugenics all the way through to colonialism, all the way through to where we are now. Transplanting the body parts of murdered babies into animals is sin. It is tapu. It is crossing a line. Justice and righteousness are the foundations of God's throne, and the foundations of the vaccines are injustice and unrighteousness. So the question that I feel that we need to ask ourselves is, what throne do we want to fellowship with? And if we say yes to the vaccine, what are we really saying yes to? What door are we opening? Or what door are we closing? And I'll leave it there, but thank you for listening.